Hey, what is up YouTube? This is Powerhouse here with another one of my videos, and today we are going to do a tier list, which is should be shocking to many people here because I haven't done a tier list since earlier this year and been mainly just focusing on reviews lately. And I've also said that I wasn't going to go back to tier list, but I really wrestled with this idea because I looked at the series, the Red Faction series, which is the title of this video, and I was like, you know what? This series definitely deserves to have it. It definitely deserves to have a quick look through and to really rank all of them. So we got 4 games here. I know there's 5. One of them is a remaster of Guerrilla, but they're going to be ranked the same because from what I can gather, there's not really much of a difference between the remaster and the original outside of some graphical updates and a few early game changes, very minor. But other than that, this basically is a series that it involves the faction known as the Red Faction. Basically a rebellious group, and I'll go through each game and kind of talk about the role of Red Faction. But one of the big things is that these games take place on Mars, or at least Mars is connected somehow. So we'll talk about it, and let's get right to it. So the first one is Red Faction 1, and just also to reiterate, I replayed all these games, basically tried to complete them as much as possible before doing this tier list. So we're going to start with the first one, Red Faction 1, and going through this was a freaking blast. So it's a first-person shooter, came out early 2000s for a bunch of consoles as well as PC. It has single player and multiplayer as well, and basically it's a shooter. You play as a miner who eventually rebels and joins the Red Faction group, which is the group of rebels going against the it's not the EDF, it's a different, I forgot the name, but basically the Martian police or whatever you want to say. So basically they're just rebelling against the government. So honestly, this game is a ton of fun. It's a blast to play. It's got that old school shooter vibe, which I love my old school shooters. So it's a ton of fun to play. The guns feel very impactful. One of my favorite guns, especially, is the rail gun, because you can basically freaking shoot through walls. So it's like, I read a comment that said something like, you got the Quake 2 railgun, that's like more iconic, but the Red Faction railgun is more badass, and I agree. I mean, you can shoot through walls, you can like scan enemies and stuff. It's annoying when you have to deal with it late game, I will not lie. But then you get able to use it to your advantage, and it's actually pretty fun. There's a great amount of variety throughout the beginning, because there's also vehicle sections and whatnot. So one of the biggest things with the game too that I forgot to mention, one of the biggest defining features are the destructible terrain, the geomod as they call it. So with this game, it's actually very interesting. The terrain you can blow up, you create holes through the walls, you can place bombs and find secret locations that way. So it's honestly a ton of fun playing with the terrain, and there's a lot of reasons to explore, and you get a lot for it. So it's a ton of fun. Definitely a reason to come back to the game just for that, and it's also applicable to multiplayer as well. Blowing up the walls on those maps, creating tunnels and stuff like that. You can watch YouTube videos on people creating tunnels in multiplayer maps using the rocket launcher. So it's honestly pretty cool, and it's a ton of fun to play. There are some issues, however. As much as I would love to put it on S tier, and I can't for couple reasons, as much as I would love to, one of the biggest issues with the game is there's some, well, I would say that the boss battles in the game are very underwhelming, and there are several. There's some segments in the game that don't feel up to standard, especially when you get to the tail end of the game. Once the events start to unfold, the story, it almost like rushes through. As good as the story is, and also a badass soundtrack, an amazing freaking soundtrack that reminds me so much of Deus Ex, which is always a good thing. One of the issues is just that it almost like, it like just rushes to the end just so you can be like, okay, this happens. Oh, but then there's this, and then all of a sudden it's just over. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I guess that's it. And it's unfortunate that the second Red Faction didn't even like follow up on it, or if I recall, it doesn't even reference it at all. I mean, the third game actually references the first game more, which is bizarre, but we'll get to it. Also, too, I would recommend there's a mod that you should get for this. I forgot the name of it. I did record this without the mod, but I ended up applying it because it adds widescreen support and support for modern resolution and fix a lot of the some game-breaking bugs that I actually ran into because of running in a higher frame rate and all that stuff. I don't have the name of it, but I will put it in here. I'll put it in the description and I'll mention it. So let's move on. This game deserves on A tier. I can see some people saying S tier, but I have to, try to be objective because there are some issues with the game that I do definitely think drag it down. All right, so next we're going to Red Faction 2, and I'm just going to quickly throw this to F because this is a huge disappointment coming from 1 to 2. The first thing is that it's almost has nothing to do with the original Red Faction. I mean, there are some similar things, like some similar, some miners and stuff like that. And there's also some terms that are mentioned, but honestly, outside of that, the game is completely different. I mean, tonally, it's like completely different. It seems more in line with Russia than anything else. And the biggest thing is that the game took place on Mars. You were a miner in Mars in the first game. I don't even know where the hell you are. I think you're on Earth, and it's also one of those games that's like, hundreds of years from the events of the first game. So it has nothing to do with the first game. And the guns feel way weaker. It just feels floaty. Nothing feels impactful. The sound effects are worse. I don't know how you do that. The music is far less memorable. The voice acting in the first game wasn't that good either. It's worse here because there's more characters you have to interact with, and unfortunately, not all the voices are good. There is one actor that's in this game that's pretty popular, pretty famous guy, but outside of that, there's really not much in terms of the voice acting talent. The story is it's like okay, I guess. It's a lot of dragging. The game, as short as the game is, which funny enough, it's way shorter than the first. Like I beat this in less than 4 hours, so it's pretty short. And the first Red Faction took me about 6. And that one I felt that one went really, went by fast. But the second game, it's shorter, but it feels like it goes longer because of just how poorly paced it is and just how freaking boring it is. It's way more linear, which the first game was already linear, but somehow they were able to do that even more. The Geo mod is worse because there's way less you can blow up, and I easily knew that was going to be a problem. As soon as I started the first level and went through it, I was like, this is a problem. So it's way more restrictive, way less you can play around with compared to the first game. Why they would take their coolest feature and try to dumb it down or water it down, I have no freaking idea. It's honestly just a very underwhelming game, not fun to play as, and honestly kind of a pain to get through. That's why I put it on the F tier, because it's just very unredeemable. There is some multiplayer. Some people do have fun with the multiplayer. From what I can gather, it's just bots. So, I mean, go ahead with that. But it's just not very enjoyable. The guns don't feel very good. It's just a boring game to get through and just not very enjoyable. Not much more to say about this. Just skip it, and I'd recommend any of the other games over this one. So the next game here is probably considered one of the best in the series, and I definitely do have to agree, and that is Red Faction Guerrilla. So instead, this came out in 2009, I believe, and so right smack dab in the 7th gen. And instead of it being a first-person shooter like the first 2 games, it moves now to an open world where you play as Alec Mason, and basically it's hard to talk about these games without really spoiling much, but basically you end up in the Red Faction group movement as well, and you help with the rebels. And now it's an open world, which makes the game far much more ambitious as a result. And the cool thing here is it's not just, you know, certain terrain pieces you can destroy. You can destroy whole buildings, vehicles. Obviously, that's always been a thing, but that can be destroyed. So you can really play around with all the buildings and take it down in so many ways. And I gotta say, this game is a blast to play. It reminds me so much of Mercenaries Playground of Destruction, which that was one of my favorite games on the PS2. But you know, the destruction at least was something I enjoyed. It's hard to go back to that one just because it moves so damn slow. Like the frame rate and all that stuff is so slow. So thankfully the remastered version, which is the one I played, ReMarstered or whatever, is the one I played, which helps with the higher frame rate and whatnot. But I just love the destruction that happens here. You know, driving the open world, trying to find a vehicle, taking the EDF vehicles, and, you know, trying to just destroy a building, you know, coming up with a plan. Either, hey, let's just brute force it, use a vehicle or something, or use a rocket launcher, or go inside and use my trusty sledgehammer, or maybe place some charges. Like, it's just so much that I think of to try to, you know, take out a building. And it's a ton of fun just thinking of it and coming up with ways to go about it, because the one thing about this game is you cannot stop. Like, you have to keep moving, because you're not really the best shot, and a lot of the enemies that you face can take a freaking ton of hits, which I forgot to mention. The characters in Red Faction 2 are bullet sponges. Some of them are in the first game, but the second game is the worst for it. But in this game, you know, it makes sense, because, you know, as a guerrilla unit, you're not there to just like sit there and just like fight. Like, yeah, you're an elite unit, but you can't just take out everyone, you know, mow everyone down, unless you have, like, you know, the weapons and whatnot. And even then, you can still probably get taken out. So you really have to just move, like, you know, place, you have to place like charges, you know, let that explode, maybe some rocket launchers, maybe have some backup come and help you out. Like, you can get some backup to come, and that could get pretty cool, like just having a group of your guys fighting off with the EDF forces and shooting them down. So it's a ton of fun. That's all I gotta say. Like, one of my favorite things is just that, like, just to play it, you know, just exploring the world and taking out a building and, you know, going from there. And I honestly have a ton of fun with this game. The story is not really anything that crazy, but I mean, if I had to be honest with you, none of the Red Faction games are really great stories. They're kind of just there to get you to point A to point B. Although the first game did have had really good characters. The plot in the first game was okay, but it had really good characters. For Guerrilla, it is what it is. It just gets you from point A to point B, and nothing really crazy or any big revelations happen. There are some connections to the first game, which I do appreciate, and I will give a thumbs up to. But other than that, I mean, it's not that crazy story-wise. So if you go for it, it's not really for that. It's more just for the fun, the sheer, you know, chaos and fun of destroying buildings and vehicles and all that stuff. So I have a ton of fun with this game. I understand to some it could get repetitive, and yeah, I can definitely see that. You know, just kind of like, you know, blowing up buildings all the time, or, you know, driving and all stuff. Like any game, it could get repetitive. But I got to be honest with you, I still have a ton of fun. It's not the most polished or most feature-packed open world. It's not like Grand Theft Auto, where you can just like grab a vehicle and then just like upgrade it and trick it out. I would say I wish the game did have more customization. I think that could have went a long way, especially because there's a ton of vehicles to find, and it sucks when you get that vehicle destroyed. It's like, oh, I wish I could like keep it forever and try to like fix it and upgrade it, but unfortunately there's not really that. But there's just a ton of weapons to play with, a ton of things to find in the open world, a ton of buildings to destroy, and honestly just a ton of fun. Easily the best game in the series to me. And like I said, Red Faction 1 is still fun as hell, but I had so much fun in ReMarstered, and there's just so much replay value for me compared to Red Faction. I didn't even talk about the side modes that they have too, which are a ton of fun to play with. So I definitely recommend it. The destruction physics are really good here. The open world is fun, just messing around. So I really have a lot of fun with this game. I can't really complain. All right, and the last one is Red Faction Armageddon. And here I was very hesitant on this one. I didn't really know what to expect going in here, because The thing is, there are some issues with Guerrilla, nothing too major in my opinion, but if they just took that and made it into this game, like just a better open world, better weapons, in terms of like, more impactful weapons, because I did feel like the weapons they had decent impact, but not like the greatest. So if they worked on some things like better shooting, a way to repair, like on paper they added a lot of stuff and fixed a lot of stuff that made that could made Guerrilla a far better game, and probably one of the best games of all time. But they, instead of making it an open world, they just make it one of the most linear shooters of all time, and it's honestly boring. I think one of the biggest issues is because in the previous games, you're fighting the resistance, and it's that theme of rebellion, but you really don't feel that here. And that's because it's mainly an alien invasion story. So you fight aliens and it's just not a good fit. The first game had some aliens and some creatures, sure, but that was like a small segment of it, and those were easily like the worst part of it. They weren't too much, thankfully, but they were there. And here, it's a majority, and it's just not very entertaining. Now, it's a shame though, because there's so much more that I do like in this game that I do wish Guerrilla had. Like, I wish Guerrilla had the magnet gun, which it's basically you can link one object and throw it to another. So like you can link an alien to like a ceiling and just like have that alien like fly up to the ceiling, or have two aliens like run into each other, or two objects. You could pull a piece of a building and have it come down and destruct. So there's a lot of potential there, but it's so boring, and none of it feels like rewarding really to pull off that much. Once you pull it off like once or twice, it's like, okay, whatever. That's how I feel, because one of the things they added here is the ability to repair and rebuild, which you're going to do that constantly, because if you do destroy like some buildings or your path to get out, you're going to have to fix that, and it's tedious to like, okay, I just had this all awesome scene, okay, let's fix this, all right, let's go up, walk up the stairs, yada yada. It's just not as fun, unfortunately, just the linear nature and just being in dank caves the whole time. Now, unfortunately, I did not finish this game because I know it's longer than the first two, and at this point, I kind of feel red factioned out. I'm like, you know what? I'm tired of this yo-yo effect, where it's like, oh, here's a great game, here's a bad game, here's a great game, here's a average game, and I think that's kind of how I feel about this game. I really want to like it because story-wise, it did have potential, but after the aliens come, I lose like all interest, and that's kind of where I am with this game. I just feel like it's wasted potential, and if it was an open world and had a lot more exploration to it, it would have been so much better. I just don't know how it feels far more linear than the first game, and the first game is fairly linear, don't get me wrong, but they offer like areas of exploration, and like I said, with the destruction, it opens up new path. Here, you destroy buildings, you're gonna have to build them back up anyway. It's not like you're gonna unlock something. Yeah, they can help get salvage points and all that stuff, but for the most part, there's not really much of a benefit to destroy buildings, and you can just build it back up anyway. So you never feel like, oh, if I destroy this generator, it's a problem. It's like, yeah, you destroy the generator, just fix it up. Like, it's all good, family. So it feels weird as a result. It would have worked better in like an open world, like like a Guerrilla or something like that. And I think in Guerrilla, it probably could have been cooler. Like, okay, we'll destroy this building that the EDF has, but when we fix it, we can make it Red Faction. You could like so much more you could have done with that in an open world than you can in a linear shooter. And like I said, it's just boring. But it's not painful to get through, and I do see some potential, so maybe I will finish it one of these days. But at this point, I really just don't know, and I don't feel very compelled to do so, it's a damn shame. That's all I gotta say. And that's really where the Red Faction series is right now. I mean, the remastered for Guerrilla came out not too long ago, but Armageddon is the last official game, so I honestly would love to see another Red Faction game, and I think the Red Faction series is very unique. It's on Mars, which there needs to be more games on Mars, honestly. The destruction physics are a ton of fun. So I really would like to see another Red Faction game, but I don't know if it's possible. I don't know the whole rights situation. I don't know if Volition has it. I don't know if THQ Nordic has it. I don't know where the rights are or who will develop it, who will take on that mantle. But I would love for another Red Faction game, in that Guerrilla style, with the Armageddon improvements. That would be awesome, and maybe some other more improvements now that technology has gotten so much better since the 7th gen. So who knows? But I really am curious on your thoughts, where you would place this, like where you think the games belong, what's your favorite, any memories that you've had with the series. Comment below. Would love to know your thoughts. As always, thank you for watching, and this is Powerhouse signing off.